You are the salt of the earth and the light of the world. And in both cases, that is not by saying anything or by doing anything, but by being something. Salt affects its environment simply by being what it is. And light affects its environment by being simply what it is, not by saying or doing anything. And if we're going to be salt and light, it's not by a lot of talk or even a lot of action that we're going to be salt and light. It's by being totally different from our environment, and so different that we affect it. And these salt and light sayings are a link between the opening section of the sermon, blessed are such and such people, and the rest of the sermon, which is about morality, a high standard of living. Well, now that puts it in context. So let's begin with salt of the earth. It's very unfortunate that most people don't know Luke's gospel. That is the least known of the four gospels. And it is Luke's gospel that tells us what Jesus meant when he said, you are the salt of the earth. Matthew's gospel doesn't define it. It just says you are the salt of the earth. And that allows the preacher preaching from Matthew by itself to put any meaning he likes into it. And unfortunately what we do is we put our own experience of salt into the meaning. And our experience is mostly culinary. And almost every sermon I've heard on You Are the Salt of the Earth talks about flavouring or preservative, that somehow a little sprinkling of Christians makes the atmosphere sweeter. What then is salt for? And in Luke's gospel, Jesus defines what he means. He says, if the salt loses its saltness, it is no good either for the field or the dunghill. And this tells you what salt was used for in the ancient world. It was scraped up from the shores of the Dead Sea. But Jesus is thinking about its use as a fertilizer. He said, on the soil. And the word soil there is exactly the same as the word earth in Matthew. The salt of the earth, the salt of the soil, the fertilizer that you put on the soil to make good things grow. And then he mentioned the dunghill. That was a reference. The word there is a word for not animal manure, but human manure. He's now into the backyard. They didn't have any flush toilets or L-sands in those days. They simply had a heap of dirt at the bottom of the yard. You went and emptied your bowels at the bottom of the yard, and then by the side of the dirt was a box full of salt from the Dead Sea. And you put a handful of that on your dirt. And that, in fact, was a disinfectant. A very simple disinfectant to stop the spread of things you didn't want to grow. Now, those two put together give you a negative and a positive influence of salt. That it promoted the growth of good things that you wanted to grow, and it inhibited the spread of bad things that you didn't want to grow. It is a vivid picture. And Christians are to be the salt of the soil. And it's interesting that our word soil again corresponds to both sewage and the ground in which we grow our vegetables and fruit and flowers. So that here you've got a very clear, vivid picture. Jesus was always using very familiar pictures from ordinary life and using them to illustrate profound truth. You are the salt of the soil. You are the people who will stop bad things growing and spreading, and who will promote the growth of good things that are wanted there. Now that's a vivid picture. And you are that salt, not by saying anything and not by doing anything, but by being totally different from the environment. But as a fertilizer or a disinfectant, you need a considerable amount before the effect shows. You need handfuls in both cases. A little sprinkling on the soil will not do a thing. And therefore, the very concept of being salt in society demands a certain proportion of that society being Christian, being different, being salt. That in fact, when in any community or society there is 5% salt the social trends reverse for the better. And it's not by anything that 5% are saying or doing, but just by being. 5%. The second aspect is the aspect not only of amount, but of distribution. Salt is no use in the box or the salt cellar. It has got to be in direct contact with the dirt before it operates. In other words, it operates by presence and not absence. And as long as salt is locked up in a meeting like this, we cannot be salt of the earth this morning. We just can't do it because we're out of contact with the dirt. You follow me? And therefore distribution, we need first of all 5%, but if that 5% were all locked up in Christian schools and in suburban churches, it would not be salt. It's got to be in among the dirt. It's got to be in direct physical contact if it's going to operate. Don't grumble because you're in direct contact with the dirt. That's precisely where salt can act. But it does need a 5% presence. And there is a disturbing attitude among Christians to try and get out of that dirt and to get into a Christian situation. I have mixed feelings about Christian schools. Because sooner or later those kids are going to be in the dirt. And I would rather they were in it while they're still at home and within reach of their parents and can work out the problems with them. I want that to be an encouragement to some of you to stay right where you are. Or to put it in Bible terms, to remain in the vocation in which you were called. Because God called you right there. Because He wanted some salt right there. Better to pray that more Christians will join you in that situation until you get the 5%. Then run away and join a Christian outfit. Distribution of salt is very, very important. And the more we shrink back into Christian ghettos, the less that salt can operate. It can only operate in direct contact with the dirt.